Hello and welcome. Concerns have been raised about some senior high schools where Muslim students are forced to observe the Christian faith, a practice that infringes on the rights to freedom of worship as enshrined in the Constitution. Formal public schooling in Ghana evolved from missionaries and of colonization. Often associated with Christianity, many Muslims, out of concern that their children will be separated from their faith, choose not to enroll them in secular schools. Later, they realized their children were at an economic and political disadvantage without the necessary skills to succeed. How true are these assertions? With me in the studio is Sheikh Arimiyao Shaibu, Regional Director, Islamic Education Unit, GES, and we'll get Diana Wilbeck on the phone, who is the former headmistress of Osei Presby High School, and Dr. Ahmed Jinapo, educationist, is also in the studio with me. My name is Nana Sakwa, and this is PM Express. Hello, and the issue or the topic on the table today is Muslims and secular education. Now I remember, going to school, Martin de Porres couldn't have been more Catholic than that. And there was Ibrahim Bako and Gary Babako, and we all happily sailed through class 1 to class 6 and wrote common entrances and went to secondary school. And there too you met, more Muslim colleagues or students, and we went through it, and that wasn't an issue. However, today the issue is that we made Gary Babako say the Lord's Prayer and, all that stuff, and the Muslims are saying, no, it's not right. Sheikh, I'll stop there and then start with you. Sheikh, I recently, I may be allowed to mention his name now. He's a good chap anyway. I recently, got in touch with Gary Babako, and he grew up and became a fine man, married with his children, and I'm sure he wasn't damaged in any way or form. Can't we just continue happily ever after?
Well, thank you very much. Religion is one phenomenon that is so sensitive to people. For people derive their identity, they have a certain consciousness about it. Their whole worldview is determined by what they believe in. And so, if you like, religion is life to people. And people are born into families, and families have responsibility, to keep and preserve their religious identities. So if you take a Christian family, for example, any child who is born in a Christian family, the father and the mother have a passionate desire to want to see that their child grows as a Christian. It's similar to that of a Muslim who is born in a Muslim family, and the father and the mother wants to protect that religious identity of such a person. But the reality also is that we live in a world of religious pluralism where the fact of life is that there are different religions in the same environment. And once one grows, depending on the enormity of the influence that comes to him, he's able to take a certain direction, a religious direction, or the other, much to the pain and regret of his parents, or her parents. If it's a Christian, once the parent sees that, look, the guy is shifting towards Islam, then they begin to get the shiva. And the vice versa is true. So that is the situation. But those who have gone through certain intellectual training, for example, my very good friend and senior in the educational, the former Director General of the Ghana Education Service, Maclean Soa, for example, you'd be amazed if he begins to recite to you the first chapter of the Holy Quran in Arabic. Because he went through the Ahmadiyya Senior High School. Even Kofi Buachi, is it ACP? I hope I'm right.
DCOP.
DCOP. I mean, he did Islamic studies in Ahmadiyya. I mean, so if you hear him also telling you things and reading things that he has memorized, the chapters of the Quran he has memorized, you will be amazed. In the same way, you can find Muslims who are also able to recite what do you call it, the Lord's Prayer, like you have just said. But you find that these people have done so, but that they have not given up their faith. The tendency to give off the faith is what is of most concern to parents where their children are the most impressionable level, or where they have not gained so much consciousness to make a very good decision on their religion, and yet certain influences take them away, is what is of most concern to most parents and most Muslim young people.
Doctor, I'll bring you here. I mean, why should, and even though the institution is a Christian institution, so far as you let everyone in, why don't you, give everyone their space so that the Muslims will not have to do Christian things, or, especially with regards to worship?
Anyway, first of all, let me say good evening to your cherished viewers, and Happy New Year. I think this is the first time I've been on this program.
Year. And you're looking very well, I must say.
And I must say I'm very privileged and honored to be sitting with Sheikh. I mean, to be honest with you, Sheikh was my lecturer.
I see.
Very briefly.
It doesn't matter. He was my lecturer at the university. And I see myself as a teacher, even though I'm teaching at the university. When people call me lecturer, I say, look, I'm a teacher. So I'm very, very privileged to be having a discussion with Sheikh. And beyond that, myself and Sheikh happens to have a very good relationship in the sense that if you are the type who was monitoring what was going on in northern Ghana, specifically in Bupi, right. We had a chieftaincy dispute, and for 5 years things were not normalized. And through the chief imam, things have been able to be normalized as we speak. And when we went to thank the chief imam, Sheikh happens to be the spokesperson for the chief imam. And I think I'll use this important platform to tell the whole public or the Ghanaian people that, look, now in Bupe we have a lot of peace. Last year we never celebrated Damba. This week we are celebrating our Damba. As a matter of fact, we are starting on Thursday, and I think the chief imam needs to be applauded for his contribution. We are starting on Thursday, and the climax is on Saturday, and the topic is peace, reconciliation, and for sustainable development.
Great.
Having said that, I think when it comes to education, it's very, very important for us to more or less look at what is education. When we say somebody is being educated or somebody is going through education, what is it? For me, the whole concept of education is a change in behavior. When we say somebody is educated, you are trying to put that person through a certain process such that the person will change in behavior that will suit the society. I teach people to become people who are useful to the society. So when it comes to Islamic education or secular education, Islam in itself is a religion. That is one thing that needs to be noted. Islam is a religion, but as part of its religious, responsibilities, it finds it necessary that people need to live a certain type of behavior. So him being Sheikh thinks that a child who is growing needs to live a life which is what? A, B, C, D, which in one way or the other is suitable to what he thinks to be what? A good person. And it's very important to understand when we say secular education, it's not the same as Christian education. Secular education is Western education. That is what we mean. When we say secular education, we are talking about the main formal education where the child goes to what? Learn English and maths, and the basic tenets of what? Being able to read and write. You understand? And I think Sheikh makes a very important point that, look, religion is very important. There's no doubt about it. Religion in itself, whether you like it or not, has an important place when it comes to societal upbringing. So if I'm a Muslim and I want my child to have a certain kind of education, be it secular, be it informal or non-formal, whatever it is, I expect my child, as part of his educational upbringing, to have a certain religious connotation. So in that sense, if you are trying to educate my child in a way that deviates from that norm, then it's going to be problematic. And let's take religion aside. Every responsible parent should know what is going on with the child's education. In the sense that if my child goes to school, I should know what the child is being taught, how he is being taught, and when he is being taught. I need to be involved. That is the basic principles of education. And unfortunately, and quite regretfully, education seems to be mortgaged to the teacher. And that shouldn't be the case. So when you talk of Islamic education and secular education, as we are discussing, the reality on the ground is that at the end of the day, the responsibility of educating the child, one, the most important one, is the parent. So the parent has to have a say. So if I'm a Muslim and I say, look, my child should have a certain kind of education, and that education should not deviate from my religious tenets or religious beliefs, I don't think there's anything wrong. But I think at the end of the day, when you come to Ghana, the whole reason why we have serious problems or why this thing is popping up is because one way or the other, I think we have failed in our educational setup. Why am I saying this? Today, Parliament resumed. And one of the issues that was discussed in Parliament was, one, some of the schools should be sent back to some of the religious bodies,
missions.
be it missions or whatever it is. Because people have come to realize that those days, when missions were included in the educational upbringing of children, they were effective. Two, some are also saying that, and it's still in Parliament, and I use Parliament as a reference point because Parliament is more or less the body that represents all of us. Another issue is that, look, when it comes to paying of fees, some of the schools that, quote and unquote, are well endowed should not receive government support. Beyond that, not too long ago, Nana, if you remember, the president, during his Meet the Press series, did say that one of the fundamental problems that we have when it comes to employment is because universities are training or bringing out students who, one way or the other, are not, I don't want to misquote him, I don't want to use a word that will not be suitable, who, from his perspective, are not the people who can work in the job market. And even certain example of what? Roman people, somebody going to study Roman civilization. I think the whole point is that when it comes to educational sector, we've missed it. In the sense that, as I stated, when we talk of educating somebody, you are changing the person's behavior. But unfortunately, and quite regretfully, with, presidents from the colonial era, people are trained to fit into the job market. And that shouldn't be the essence of education. Education should be such that the person is trained or the person changes behavior in a way that that person can produce something. Independence. If I hold a first degree, and to be honest with you, my first degree is in philosophy and religious studies, I should be somebody who should be able to fit in any environment that I find myself. That is universal education. You understand? I should be somebody, if I'm training an individual, especially at the university level, that person should be able to produce knowledge. That person should be independent. There is lack of entrepreneurship. But coming back to secondary education, vis-a-vis the discussion that we are having, I do not have a problem with Muslims wanting to have their own education. But the reality on the ground is that, look, Christianity dominates. But you should not try to indoctrinate somebody during the educational process.
Let me. I have on the phone now Denise Diana Welbeck, who's the former headmistress of Osei Presbyterian High School, so for 11 years, and I'm sure there must be a good number of Muslim students that went through her tenure as a headmistress. Let's see how she dealt with it. Good evening, Denise.
Good evening.
Welcome to the show, and obviously, I'm sure they've told you about. We're discussing. As a Christian school, how did you deal with Muslim students that came to your school? Did they have to go to church because you are a Presbyterian school, or did you excuse them? How did you manage that?
Whatever I'm going to say now is based on my experience when I was the head of the school.
Okay.
Before you entered the school, we had this undertaking which you had to sign, which was attached to the admission form. That, this is a Presbyterian school, and we expect you to be of good moral behavior, and then the other things that go with it. So right from the word go, we make you aware that, we have the code of conduct and then the ethics of the school that has to be followed. Meanwhile, worship is part of the educational process. So in our case, where we didn't have an assembly hall, the Presby Church, that is the Osei congregation, made available the chapel to us, where we all go there to worship. Initially, it was like, we were so hard on them that it's a must that you must attend. But then the other side of the coin too is that, we had other people belonging to other faiths. Okay. All that we did was, is a matter of making them aware that worship was part of the school process. It went with its challenges where some of the students felt that, they were being bothered. So for the first 2 periods, they would not be in the school to take part. But I think those are some of the challenges that one will have to go with, rules that are set up. But I must say that during my tenure, I've had 2 occasions where Muslims have been head prefects. And they have gone along with whatever system had been put in place. As I remember, there was a time when they made this proposal that they should be given somewhere to worship. I told them that this is a Presby school. It's an impossibility. The only thing you can do is you could go behind my office, just turn to the direction where you have to pray, do your prayer, and that is it. We have a Muslim association in the school. By then, they had a Muslim teacher who was their patron. But even then, when the patron left, I remember there was one of the teachers who took us to guide them through. So I don't see it as a big deal. It's just understanding. I myself am a Presbyterian, but I attended Catholic school throughout, from primary to the secondary school level.
Okay.
And I enjoyed attending, service because I was going to have a bite on the communion, because in the Protestant church, we only take it once in a while. But with the Catholics, anytime you attended Mass, provided you're taking your first communion. And it was a delight. It molded me. And I think that is what has made me what I am. Because I just had to go along with whatever code of conduct existed in the school vis-a-vis my faith. And I think that is what has made me what I am.
Thank you very much. And I'll bring Sheikh in here now. There's no really cause for alarm.
Some concern.
I'm just bringing, I have Sheikh Arimi out here, and I'm just addressing, your situation to him. I mean, should every school have a small mosque?
Well, I have met Muslim students and who have raised some of these concerns. Just for the fun of it, I asked some of the students, look, you are in St. Thomas Aquinas, and you want to be given a space to build a mosque? Do you hear the title Saint? Saint? Do you hear that? Yeah, so my view is that it's just an impossibility to request that in a school whose names really gives you a clear evidence that it's a purely mission school, a Christian, for you to request that a mosque be built in the school. For me, it's an unreasonable request. But I noticed that even in St. Thomas Aquinas, the school authority had provided a certain space for the Muslims to meet there and say their prayer, which for me, it's okay. So I don't expect Muslims to request that they must necessarily build a mosque. But that in some other schools, that's where there's flexibility. For example, if you take St. John's Grammar Senior High School, where my daughter schools, the authority have allowed a mosque to be built. So therefore, the Muslims are able to. So there's a certain difference here. In most of the schools, which are purely mission schools, they will not allow you to build, but they will provide a space so that every day you can meet there and say their prayer. Once that is done, there's not so much problem. The other issue has to do with worship. You see, there's a difference between school program and worship. A worship that comes with all the nuances of that religious belief, the artifacts and everything, the liturgy, the belief system, the preaching, I mean, where I keep on saying it. I mean, my children reported to me once that they sat in front of a pastor. I mean, who told them that, I mean, Muslims will never enter the paradise, they will enter the hell. Now, these are children who see me as a role model. Mm-hmm. They want to go after me, live after what, and I talk with them about my faith, which I want to impart to them. Mm-hmm. Now, so the psychology here is, then you subject them to a certain psychological dilemma about even their religious identity, what they see for the future. Because why? The pastor has an opportunity to, and unchallenged, to be able to tell them that. And there are cases where many Muslim children, students have lost their Islamic identity through this process. In fact, in history, there are so many examples in the northern part of our country. The reason for which my grandparents, for example, never liked the Western education, because they thought that the Western education was a means through which Muslim children either became less Muslim or lost completely their Islamic identity. You'll be surprised. My father, completing Form 4, my father never wanted me to continue education after Form 4. The reason for which I stayed in the house for 6 years before I had to continue.
Because you scared you might change.
That's the scare. So there are a lot of evidence where people who were coming from Muslim families through the Western education lost their Islamic identities. And that is why later on you find that what we call the Islamic Education Unit was established. I mean, that's where I work, in order to prove to the most Muslim parents that, look, you can still have Western education, secular education mixed up with the Islamic ideals that will still preserve the identity of your children. So I think, in my view, if we can have a certain balanced way of doing it, in such a way that moral education and spiritual education, which is a very important component of the total education, if you like, should be organized in such a way that a comparative approach is used, where the Christian child, the Muslim child, has an opportunity to listen to the Islamic viewpoint of a certain moral issue. At the university, I opted to do Christian ethics because I wanted to expand my knowledge. Mm-hmm. So I opted to do Christian ethics. I put aside the Muslim ethics and I picked on what they call it.
Was there any difference?
And that is knowledge aspect of it. But the worship aspect is where the issue is. I mean, you are compelled to buy Bibles. I mean, you are going to school. I mean, that one is a must. You have to do it. Whenever you are in a mission school and they're going to do the night carols and lessons. I mean, and carols, you are compelled to attend it. But the contrast is that in Islam, once you are not a Muslim, you don't even enter the mosque to say a prayer. By our rule, it's a precondition for you to pray that you must be a Muslim. So in an Islamic school, for example, no Christian child will be compelled to enter into a mosque and say a prayer. The Christian side is the reverse.
But would you be allowed in the school?
Yeah, you'll be allowed. In where I work, for example, I mean, I can tell you more than 80% of teachers who teach in Islamic school, in our schools, are Christians. More than 80% are Christians. And no Christian teacher is compelled to attend any Muslim activity just because he teaches. No Christian teacher and no Christian child is made on Friday to enter any mosque and say a prayer.
Are the girls made to wear the hijab?
Yeah, the hijab. The hijab comes as a form of uniform for identity, that you must be identified as attending an Islamic school. But that you are not compelled to enter any mosque. When you go home, remove it and do whatever you want to do. But as a uniform, you will use it. And some Christian parents are comfortable with it. They don't see anything wrong with it. Of course, there are some Christian parents also who raise, in some cases, for this alone, some children have been removed and their school have been changed. But there are many of them who still.
Doc, let me come to you. Probably it's an unfair question because, most secondary schools were set up by the missionaries. But has it gotten to a time where we should take all religious aspect away from school and just come in there and read and write and go and be a good citizen?
Well, I think first of all, before I answer that question, Sheikh gives a very interesting scenario, and I happen to more or less associate myself with it, in the sense that I happen to have gone to a school which, as a matter of fact, is not an Islamic school, but Islamic dominated. Okay. I bear an Islamic name, Ahmed. Ahmed Abdullah is a Muslim name, even though I'm not a Muslim. At Damango Secondary School, where I happened to go for secondary school, it was, about 80 to 90% Islam. And when he was giving his presentation, I was just casting my mind back to when we used to have fasting period. And even though it was not a law, it was more or less like a tradition. By 4:35, everybody's waked up, whether you were a Muslim or not. And you couldn't complain because it was Islamic dominated. I happen to have attended a sixth form at a school which is not a Christian school, but to a reasonable extent, the tenants and everything was more Christian. Sunyani Secondary School. And interestingly, the person who was heading the school was a woman, somebody that I have a lot of close affection with, and she's on retirement, and we still talk, Miss Ado. The school was more or less like a Christian school. We had a chaplain, we go for morning prayers, we go for every Sunday worship and stuff like that. But what strikes me most is that at Susek, I had friends who were not Christians and they were not allowed to attend, and they refused to attend a church service and stuff like that. The point is this: I think it's very, very important for us to make a distinction between religion and education. And in doing that distinction, it's also very difficult, and we find ourselves in a dicey situation because when we talk of education in our context, education, as it pertains now, is Western education, which, as a matter of fact, is unraveled around religion, because Westernization in itself came into being or was propelled on the what? On the wheels of religion, and that is Christianity. My point is this: when I listened to Headmistress Welbeck, Headmistress Welbeck is a Presbyterian who happened to attend Catholic. She happened to be a headmistress. She had Muslims who were in her school, and she consciously allowed the Muslims to do what they are supposed to do. I think the challenge or difficulty is that when you have people who are so religiously opinionated that they think that there's no religion that is above their religion, be they Muslims or Christians. And I think the reverse, when it's with Christianity and it's Islam, is the same. If you have an Islamic school, we have Islamic secondary schools in this country. If you have an Islamic secondary school where you think that a Christian cannot be allowed to practice his faith, then there's a problem. Because at the end of the day, you remember I started by indicating, look, the essence of education is a change in behavior. Religion, for me, within the context of education, is a secondary issue. In the sense that you are looking at how the person will become a productive member of what society, whether through the Christian faith or the Islamic religion. But at the end of the day, you are looking at what? Education. So what are we debating about? The whole debate is very simple. I strongly believe that, look, Christians should be allowed to practice their faith, notwithstanding which school they are attending, and the same as what? As Muslims. But my worry, and I think Sheikh will be in a better position to address this issue. I do not know whether this issue of religious intolerance in secondary schools is at an alarming state, because I strongly believe that this issue has not been, even you may have pockets of resistance. Look, I had a friend of mine who is a student. Then she told me that her son had admission to St. Charles. And she knows St. Charles is a very good school. You know St. Charles in Tamale. It's a very good school, but the only thing is that they eat pork. And she doesn't understand why her son will go and eat pork. Then I said, well, if you strongly believe that your son should not eat pork, then your son should not go there. Because you may not even have the psychological framework to what? To give money for your son to be educated. So, as Sheikh rightly put it, look, religion has an important play when it comes to the upbringing of an individual. And religion is not just about morality, because morality in itself can be limited to what? Doing the right and wrong. But at the end of the day, religion moves beyond doing the right and wrong, which for him is right. And which for you is what? Is wrong. What may be wrong for you, for him, may be right. So it moves beyond this whole issue of what? Right and wrong. And so I strongly believe that there needs to be talked about. Beyond that, I think the educational system as it exists in Ghana is something that I think as a nation we haven't gotten it right.
I'm going to take a break here, and I'll pick up from there, because the same Westerners who brought us this same education that we are grasping hold of, they've sort of have dropped religion from all their, school sectors. Well, you don't say any prayers, you don't say anything, just come in, read your books, do your maths, and go home. And they are producing more scientists and more IT men and more doctors than we are. So should we follow them? If they brought this system and they have dropped it and they are doing well, is it about time we follow them, or do we still need to grasp hold of religion and education? Stay tuned. Muslims and secular, or if I say Christian education, if there's any such thing. That's what we're discussing. And with me in the studio is Sheikh Arimiya Shaibu, who is the Regional Director, Islamic Education Unit at GES. And also to my immediate left is my own brother, Dr. Ahmed Jinapo, who's an educationist. And just before we went on the break, Sheikh, I just want to find out that, you see, Christianity and Islam as a foreign religion on us that we have adopted. And when these religions were coming, they came along with the education or the schooling, which we adopted. However, they've gone back and they seem to have dropped the religion from their education. They've separated it. And they are producing more scholars, producing morally straight people in society. Has it gotten to the point where maybe we should scrap Christianity and Islam from schools and just teach people to become civil in society, and when they come home, make them religious if need be?
No, I mean, if you take religion, I mean, generically speaking, it's not for the West, not for the East.
Okay.
Because of what people believe in. That's why in Africa, for example, I mean, Professor Nviti will tell you that the African is incurably religious. Mm-hmm. So we as Africans, we have belief in the spiritual world, but then Islam and Christianity came to rather firm up and give a new dimension to that kind of belief. That's exactly what has happened. So you find that the African Christian is so firm in his faith. Mm-hmm. I mean, building on the sense of African spirituality and the sense of God, and that is exactly what happens to the Muslim. So the African may not necessarily shed off religion like the West is doing, because the Western people had to shed off religion because they themselves had their own problem with religion, how religion was manipulated and misused actually to subjugate people. I mean, you remember how just a scientific discovery of Galileo, for example, could make him suffer a certain kind of punishment, for example. So that came during Enlightenment. Then the Western people began pushing off religion as if religion was not important. So many arguments have been against the existence of God, for example. Mm-hmm. So the atheistic viewpoint, and so on and so forth. But for we, Africa, religion is so important and is ingrained in us. So we cannot shut off religion. Life goes beyond the confines of...
I'm not saying we should shut it off. Just take it out of the schooling system so that Sundays, no Christian should go to church. On Fridays, no Muslim should go to the mosque. You're just here to do your maths and English.
You see, when you do so, then you have rather reduced the whole education. That's why, you see, one doctor was trying to define education. He gave as a very broad and universal understanding of it. And if you like, the sociological interpretation is that education is a means of socialization. And socialization comes with also your beliefs and values, traditions. You see, that is why you find that even Ghanaian traditional people, for example, are also so hard against Western secular education because we were de-Africanized of our values. You are made to feel that by being African you were rather subhuman. You see it, and so I think that for us, education is a means of socialization, and socialization includes our beliefs, our values, and so on and so forth. So for us, we would want to make our religious training part and parcel of our education, so that we don't become like the Western people who, after getting education, you say you no more believe, in God.
Well, I think as traditionalists should also start finding a school for us so we can pour libations in the morning before we go to class. Can you imagine the chaos that will start? But let me just read a couple of comments from here. It's worrying because no Islamic school will ever force a Christian child to offer Muslim prayers. Why should such schools force Muslim students to Christianity? That's exactly what you mentioned. And Nova says it's a way, way and means should be available, or else we shall invite Boko Haram to Ghana. Who said that? The Abukari Garifu, no Boko Haram yet. And Muhammad Abukari is saying that, Muslim schools normally excuse Christians from, going to Friday prayers. And if I go down, Muhammad again says there's no compulsion in religion. Nana Kojo Mackenzie, that's how hypocritical the so-called Christians can be, And Amin Moro, you can force the horse to the riverside, but you can't force it to drink. Why force a Muslim to worship your faith? It's barbaric, and the government should intervene for the Muslim and Christian schools. For your info, Islamic schools don't force Christians to join worship and allow to go to their respective denominations. I'll bring you in here, Doc.
I think, first of all, we need to be very careful not to jump to the conclusion, even though Sheikh is in a position that he knows what goes on because he's in the field. I don't think we should jump to the conclusion that Muslims all over in various Christian schools are being forced. That is not an issue. I do not have the facts. But, of course, there could be pockets of institutions where some Muslims are forced to do what is against their will. And the reverse could also be true.
They are saying that because when you were signing into the school, these were the things that we told them, look, in this institution, I do A, B, C, D. And so when you come, you can't then say, well, I don't want to do the E part.
You see,
when you signed before coming in. So maybe before you come in, you should say, look, I'll sign, but you need to take off E.
Nana, I gave you an example of a student of mine whose son happened to have had admission to St. Charles. When I was at Susek, on certain specific days, we were given a delicacy, which was what? Egg. So what it means is that if I am a person who does not eat egg, and I've signed that I'm going to abide by the rules and regulations of that school, what it means is that on that day, I will not be able to eat that breakfast. I should make provisions for myself. So if you are saying that, look, because I'm a vegetarian, I don't eat egg, even though I'm in the school and I've signed that I'm going to abide by the rules and regulations of the school and I've paid my fees, the school institution should what? Should provide me with an alternative food. That is something as parents, just as Sheikh wants his kids to be brought up in a certain way, he has total control on which school his child attends. If the debate or the issue is that, look, we have a growing number of Muslims in the country, but the various schools that addresses their concerns are not enough. So more needs to be done. That is the debate that we can what? We can have. You understand what I'm saying? I do not think his son will go to St. Charles. I mean, never. that would be an absurdity. But why would he allow his son to go to St. Charles?
No, but haven't we moved on in civilization enough to know that you don't have to come to school on Sunday, come and set a church mass, or Friday go to the mosque. You can do that at home. Here, you are here to become a good citizen.
Look, we have, but the reality on the ground is that he made an important point that religion is part and parcel of us. There's no doubt about it. And more important, when it comes to Africa, look, I have sat in so many meetings that before I go to work, I pray. But on each and every meeting, we have to pray. And most times when they are praying, I sit down and watch. It's not as if I'm an atheist, so I don't, but I find it to be something that, excuse me to say, quote and unquote, is irrelevant. In the United States, they've had various court constitutional battles about the state, the school, and religion. We've had people who have sued the state that they do not understand why prayer should be said in school. We've had instances where people have even sued the state when it comes to what the national pledge, because they believe that pledging allegiance to the flag amounts to what? Idolism. Do you understand what I'm saying? So these are debates that will come up. As a country that we are growing, whilst we are trying to entrench our democracy, people will start questioning some of these things. And it's legitimate. And they will come more and more. We've had instances in the United States where we have something called homeschooling. Homeschooling. People don't want to send their kids to school because they think that the school is such an indoctrinating institution where people, one way or the other, are coerced to be more or less subversive to to subdue to the state. So, for somebody whose child goes to school, all he thinks of is that when the child is in school, all the child is being taught is to be obedient to authority. And he doesn't believe in that. So I strongly believe that this whole debate about Christianity, Islam, and all those things in schools boils down to the individuals, we ourselves, the people managing the institutions. People do not have to be overly, what do they call it, xenophobic.
Right.
Let me bring Sheikh in here. Sheikh, would it then be time for the Muslim or Islam fraternity to also build their institution enough to accommodate
no amount of segregation, though?
One of the reasons why we do not experience some of the very negative and horrible conflicts between Muslims and Christians in other parts of the world is because of the system we have had here. What is happening in Central African Republic at the moment, it saddens my heart, gives me so much distress. That Muslim militia and Christian militia lock horns and they kill and burn people publicly. And just for the belief that we uphold. Why should it happen so? We are fortunate in Ghana here, even the boarding school system has helped us. And that's how come, look, your brother, the one that you're going to stab is your classmate. You can see him clearly. And so on and so forth. Look, we board cars in Ghana here. The Muslim sits here and the Christian sits on the other side. And in our tenancy arrangement, the houses where we reside, as co-tenants, for example, what we call the United Nations. You find your next door neighbor is a Christian, so you can see that whenever there's any conflict, what is going to happen? So I think that sharp segregation for me is not the answer. But like you said, that mutual respect for our human rights. Today, because of enlightenment, and we are teaching our children human rights issues, constitutionalism, good governance, democracy, and all those values that go with the concept of democracy. So once you do so, it means that you have exposed the children to these concepts. And so therefore, he knows now his rights. And he knows that he can go to the Constitution, and the Constitution guarantees him to practice any religion and to give manifestation to that practice. Now he goes somewhere, and another one is imposed on him. So conscious of his democratic right, he begins to question it. So I think that this kind of enlightenment is what must inform policymakers to have a second look at it. Can we have a certain balanced arrangement? That has always been my proposal. I will be the first to reject the idea that mission schools should be denied the right to give expression to their values and their beliefs. Like if you go to a Catholic school, why should I? What is it? Because my presence as a Muslim, the Catholic school should stop taking communion? What right do I have? No. It's a Catholic school. They uphold certain beliefs. They must be allowed to practice that. Now, aside of that, children that are in that school, because the Catholic or other missions have the objective of also helping people get educated. Their objective is not to indoctrinate or convert the children. So if they can look at that humanitarian aspect of it and also have a certain system that allows the children to have an experience of moral values across the religious divide, I will be happy that if a Catholic school calls me that, look, today we are going to have a moral talk and we want Sheikh Arimiao to come talk about honesty from the Islamic perspective. And yet, those children are made up of Christians of all denominations, Methodists, Presby, Catholics, Zion, and then including the Muslims. And then the next time, these same children are being addressed by a pastor who also addresses matters of corruption from the Christian perspective. So that when it comes to matters of values, we understand our common values. And my religion, for example, calls for a religious dialogue. I mean, it calls, you people of the book, come and let's be on a common term. It means that there's a recognition of a certain common term, common values that we all uphold, based on which we can all be talking together. And building on that, build a more pluralistic community wherein there is unity, there's understanding, there is love. And I think that my proposal has always been that kind of approach. Let's have a balanced arrangement. Let's also allow the missions to have their right.
Sheikh, apart from Friday worship, apart from the mosque, the hijab, what about 5, 6 things? What are the main differences between these two religions? Because their stories very much the same.
Pretty. I mean, the sharp divide. You see, Islam is strictly monotheistic. I'm qualifying it strictly. In other words, it talks about just the unity of God that as one and only does not have any component, or it's not a composite where you can talk of a certain portion, like this. In Christian, they have a conception of the unity of God that comes in 3 persons. And those 3 persons are very, very, very important. None of them can be sidelined. You talk of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. None of these components of this unitary concept of God in Christianity is less important. So if you bring a Muslim child to sit and to be given this kind of doctrine,
it becomes
really a big issue. That is where, and then there are other values like, he quickly mentioned the issue of pork, for example.
Yeah.
We have a strict dietary system in Islam. There are certain foods, alcohol.
Halal.
Those things are things that we shun. Our way of dressing, our women, the way they are brought up. Whilst a Christian woman can decide at any time to put her shorts and come out and walk on the street, the Muslim community wants the Muslim girl to be brought up in a certain way. These are the differences that comes with our values.
Doc, you've mentioned how important religion is to us, and if you separate it from schooling, it becomes an issue. How about like Bible, religious studies that is taught in the classroom? I can imagine we go Sunday, it's important to us, so let's do it on Sunday. But in the classroom, should it be taught, or can we lose that?
You see, I think that is where the problem is, in the sense that, and back to the question that you asked Sheikh before I get to that, I do not think, and I 2 minutes, so very quickly, I do not think there's the need for there to be a compromise in terms of religions. Islam is Islam, Christianity is Christianity. It's as simple as that. But when you posit that within the spectrum of education, that is where you have a problem, especially when you want to force somebody to do something that is not the best. I think overall, the biggest challenge that we have in this country with reference to this whole issue is that we have scarcity of schools. If we have a replica of St. Aquinas in Damango, which is a Muslim-dominated area, that I can get the best education in Damango, and I'm a Muslim and I can practice my religion with what? With freedom. I don't think we would have this problem. So, looking at the way forward, I strongly believe that, look, government, the nation as a whole, the Muslim community, the Christian community will have to seriously invest in education. We have people who are Christians who attend what? Ahmadiyya. In Kumasi. We have people who are Muslims who go to a presec because they want the best of education. Yeah. And they try as much as possible to compromise their beliefs, even against their own religious. So I strongly believe that, look, our educational system is a little bit problematic. And it's not just limited to this government, it's something that is historical. I have always advocated that, look, this country should become an educational mecca, in the sense that this country has the potential of being the biggest, what do they call, Massachusetts in Africa. You go to the state of Massachusetts is one of the biggest hubs when it comes to education. Why can't we, Ghana as a nation, do that? We have Muslims, we have Christians. If we are one of the best Islamic universities in this country, trust me, we get students from what?
Thank you
from Nigeria
very
who are coming here
much,
to
gentlemen. Sheikh, thank you very much. Doctor, thank you very much. It's been a very educative discussion. I enjoyed it very much, and I knew there was so much on Facebook, but somehow my iPad won't open for me to read your comments. I do apologize, but continue the conversation on Facebook. My name is Nana Sakwa, and as I say, tomorrow we'll be back to do it all over again.